recap of what I did last time. Keep it short and sweet and just look through a few. I won't tell any stories about those ones, so we can get into the meat of what it is that we're covering today. Speaking of which,
right click. I mean left click, sorry.
left click. Got it. All right, so Big Five recap. There is an official Ugly Five. So it is an official classification of wild animals, and so we'll go through the Ugly Five. Before we do that, though, there is something called the Little Five. So we have the Big Five, which is probably the most famous classification of wild animals, which I'll do a brief review of. Little Five, one slide, we'll whip through them just to show you who the Little Five are, and they're an official classification as well. We'll spend quite a bit of time on the Ugly Five, and then, again, time permitting, just as we did last time, there is a category called Spot, Stripes, and So Strange, which are all the ones that aren't covered in the previous presentation that are some of my favorites and that I thought I would share with you. Only if we have time, though. So
can we guess what the Ugly Five are ahead of time?
You may guess what the Ugly Five is. So let me do the recap and do the Little Five, and then before...
We'll have a contest.
Then we'll have a little contest to see if you can figure out what the Little Five are. I think the chances of getting them, unless you know, are very slim. Yes, did you have a question?
So whose classifications are these?
They are...
So strange.
I'm not altogether sure, but I think the Big Five is sort of a renowned classification scheme.
Some organization or something?
It's probably Conservation Africa, or, I mean, it's a variety of places that all kind of adhere to it. So I think anybody focused on conservation in Africa or running any kind of reserves, both public and private, all sort of
But it
support the same thing.
originated way back, 100 years ago.
It would have originated way back when, during the, probably during sort of when hunting in Africa first became a big deal. So it would probably be hunters that came up those, the Big Five are the ones that they want to hunt, either for their skins, tusks, or horns. So that's why the Big Five are what they are. The King of Beasts, of course, sort of numero uno in the Big Five classification is the lion. Here is a beautiful specimen that came from Kenya, and probably not his mate because it was taken in a different part of Kenya. Here's the lioness. Second of the cats is the leopard. This was taken in South Africa. I was extraordinarily patient during this viewing, and I'd shot quite a lot of shots prior to this, and you've just got to time it right and have your camera poised for when these animals yawn. It's I'd love to say it was a growl, it wasn't, and some of my ones of lions doing that, I would love to say those were roars, but it wasn't those either. This was just a good old-fashioned yawn because he was bored. This was one taken, was probably one of my first photographic safaris, where I'd received my first DSLR and camera, and it was my first shooting of, not shooting as in shooting, shooting of a leopard.
May I ask what the actual distance was?
This one was probably, the leopard was probably where the mirror is, so that distance. She was down in a gully, so in a dry riverbed, and we had reversed our Land Rover back, hanging over the edge of the cliff of the ravine, and so I was hanging out the back of the Jeep or the Land Rover, and managed to get this shot, which, when you can focus in on the eyes and the eyes are actually looking straight at the camera, it always ends up being a pretty good shot. This was an extraordinarily hot day, and so finding a rhino drinking from a watering hole was actually pretty good. I just love the rhino's expression, your eyes closed, you can just look at the sheer bliss of, oh, this water tastes good. Another one on my most recent trip into the north of South Africa, at a game reserve that is part of a group of hotels that my dad oversees. It was our first trip to this game reserve, and we actually had a really good time and got to see some good rhino. And then the last of the Big Five, the fourth of the Big Five is buffalo. A lot of contention as to why this one actually makes the cut, because it just looks like a cow with big horns. I'm not a huge fan of buffalo. I think they're kind of cows with big horns, although they're extremely temperamental, and had an opportunity to witness a fight between lions and buffalo. They didn't actually, clash horns and claws, but made a lot of noise and did a lot of running around and chasing after each other, trying to get dominance over a particular area. Bad hair day. It was kind of a fun one. Buffalo. It was about 200 buffalo, so it was a beautiful experience to just see all these buffalo getting up to their non-business, because they don't do very much. But this one was wallowing, and again got a pretty nice picture. And then elephant. In terms of distance, it's a question I'm very often asked: how close? This one, very close. If you can see here, our tracker sits on a little seat right at the front of the Land Rover, so it's actually on the hood of the Land Rover, and you can see the elephant literally is reach out and touch. And she wasn't very happy. She had a really, really little one, and I think she just was having a bad day, and so she was a little annoyed. And this one again was from a most recent trip to South Africa, and this baby's probably about 3 months old.
The pictures we've seen prior have been with a big telescope. No one ever gets this close to a baby elephant. How do you do this?
So all of the drives are on open Land Rovers. In Kenya, they actually had a canopy, which was terrific, as we were talking before the talk. Animals are used to and have grown up with the shape, the size, and the smell of the vehicles. And so as long as you keep the shape consistent, they won't attack, they won't get agitated. As soon as you stand up, it's a problem. But with the canopy, because the shape stays the same, you can slowly stand up to get sort of better viewing. But the private reserves, the vehicles go really, really close. And when you go into places like Kenya, their tourism industry has been hit so terribly by the horrific Somalians who have wiped out people and just gone in and gunned them down because they're not Muslims. So the tourism industry is absolutely in ruins, and so if you go there, you're treated like royalty, and they will take you into the most phenomenal situations. Obviously still being safe, but getting really, really close. And so my last trip was just unbelievably awesome.
What mistake did the American woman who was killed this week by the lion inside the vehicle, did you read about it just a 3 or 4
I
days
didn't,
ago?
but the mistake she made was opening the window.
Well,
Probably not a good idea.
yeah.
When you're driving yourself, all bets are off, because yes, the animals will see vehicles in state parks, but you still have to adhere to sort of common sense. And I think that people, generally speaking, are not educated. They're just not smart in the ways of wild. This is not a zoo. It's not a drive around an enclosed area where these animals have become sort of tame. You really have to respect the fact that it is wildlife. They are wild, and so knowing how to behave and how to think in those situations is important. So we're going to be moving on to the little five. I think the spots, stripes, and so strange, just like the last talk, are a thing for a future date, because I know we're never going to get through all of this. I have 100 slides, by the way, so I think we're on about 8.
You can include some Rotary members, the ugly and the strange.
I can, so strange, yes. I have
Don't make control for yourself, Ken.
So did you want to guess the little five? The little five you'll never get. So I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'm going to kind of skip through the little five. Before we go on to the ugly five, though, I will give you an opportunity to guess those. Because the little five, honestly, I didn't know them until my most recent trip. So these are the little five. We just went through the big five. So for the lion, his counterpart is the ant lion, is the top left-hand corner. I have seen a couple of these. So the leopard tortoise is actually, it was a really, really huge one. It was in Botswana, and that is one of my photographs. The rest are just from Google. So antlion corresponds to the lion, of course. The leopard tortoise corresponds to the leopard, and I actually have one of those, a little one, at home as a pet. The buffalo weaver is a really small bird found in many parts of Africa. The rhino beetle, because of the little horn that sticks out. And then finally the elephant shrew, which is a tiny little rodent. So those are the official little five that correspond to their big five counterparts. All right, oops. Okay, so you don't get to guess this one because I hit the button too soon. So it doesn't. If you were going to guess hyena, it doesn't count because obviously I gave that away. So anybody want to guess any of the others that might make the cut on Ugly Five?
Warthog.
Warthog is right. Very good. Maybe that was one of the easy ones. Any of the others? The others are one's gettable just because of an event that occurs in Africa. So you might get that one.
Wildebeest?
Wildebeest is right. Yeah. Give the man a cigar.
Crocodile? Crocodile?
No, the crocodile is not ugly enough.
No.
No. We'll get onto the others when we get there. The hyena is, yes.
I was going to say a python, some snake.
No, there are no snakes in the Ugly Five. So the hyena, this particular hyena is the spotted hyena. There are three different types. There's the spotted, the striped, and the brown. I've had the privilege of only seeing the spotted hyena. Probably the most interesting. Bear with me because I'm going to say some words that might make you feel uncomfortable. What's unique about the hyena is the female is the dominant, by far the dominant. She's much bigger than the men. She controls all things, including having to actively participate in copulation. And that is because she has a pseudopenis. It's an elongated clitoris that is used for urination, copulation, and giving birth.
Wow.
So many schools of thought would classify the hyena as a hermaphrodite, although she doesn't operate her pseudopenis in the way that men operate. Because of the shape and size of her organ, she has to get into a very unusual position for the male to actually copulate with her. And so she has to be an active participant and want it. Which is unlike most animal species. When the guy wants it, the guy gets it. So, an unusual thing about hyena. I haven't actually got a close-up of the female organ, so if you're expecting to see that here, you'll just have to take my word for it. This was the first hyena that I filmed. It was in 2002. And it's the only picture I have that comes closest to hyena laughing. They do actually make this kind of cackling, laughing sound, and as you can see from the expression on his face, it does look a little like he's laughing. More recently, the rest of the pictures of a hyena, actually these two, interesting story. I think this one's kind of a nice one. This one's probably even better. They look so tame, and it just looks like a dog. In this particular instance, there was a leopard had made a kill, and as leopards do, she had taken the kill up into a tree, and this hyena was just patiently just sitting there waiting, hoping that the zebra carcass would fall out, or at least some remnants of this kill would fall out so that he could scavenge as opposed to having to go and hunt for himself. They hunt in packs. They're very effective killers. They prefer to scavenge. My most recent encounters with hyena were probably, in fact, they were without doubt the best, and that occurred in my trip to Kenya. It was remarkable how many hyena we saw. We saw loads and loads of lions, and more hyena than I've seen collectively in all my safaris put together prior to that. This one was, we literally landed at the airstrip at Mara North, which is in the Masai Mara. And on our drive back, it's supposed to take about 40 minutes. I think 2 hours later, we finally got to our lodge because we kept seeing the most amazing sights. And there was a small clan of about 6 or so hyenas scattered around this rocky. The terrain that you can see there is pretty much the terrain all around the airstrip. Not the airstrip itself, but all around it on our way driving to the lodge up in the mountains. And this female was just, I don't know what she was looking at, because several of my photos are looking kind of past me, so I don't know what she was keeping her eye out on. But that was kind of an interesting shot. I captured this one just because you can see potential prey in the background. The deer is actually pretty far off. It was a sort of an inclined hill, very rocky, and the same animal just caught from a different angle with I think it's a Thompson's gazelle in the background. I have a picture of Thompson's gazelle. They're unique to Kenya as well. Here, just lying down, a close up. When you look at the face, it looks very much like a hound. And I've got a picture in here, and this is starting to get to it, where you can just start to see, I mean, yes, they may be ugly just because of their loping, sort of posture. I don't think they're that ugly, although this one, you just start to see the viciousness. You just, to me, I just start to see just this, start of a snarl. The mouth is just starting to look a little gruesome. And this one you can also see she's not in super great shape in terms of her coat. It's pretty matted and got little ticks and horrible things in it. They're very, very social animals. And here there are two kind of getting to know each other and just saying a little, hi, how are you? They look pretty thin, so probably haven't eaten. Now this one is where I go sort of, full hog to sort of saying, that look is just not that great. She is definitely a she. You can't see it too clearly here, we'll probably see it on the next picture better, but you can see the blood around her jowls. She's obviously killed and fed. And the other thing that's particularly noteworthy, can anybody actually tell from this picture?
Pregnant.
Very pregnant. So yeah. And you can see here, you can just see the blood around here and a little bit around her mouth. We went on one of our drives. We were desperately trying to find leopard. On our trip to Kenya, we didn't get to see leopard. I've seen leopard loads and loads of times in other parts of South Africa, but didn't get to see leopard in Kenya. We went to a place called Leopard Lane, I think it is. It looked like a scene out of Lion King. It had, sort of, you were driving through sort of like canyon. There was high cliffs on either side, little caves and outcroppings and so on. And we would go along and all of a sudden we'd just spot hyena, and then we'd spot a little more hyena, and some of them are far away. This particular one was a really, really intense zoom, so it was, to a full 300 zoom. She was just really well camouflaged. How our guide spotted her, I have no idea, but I just like this picture of her kind of peering at us. So she was definitely looking at us. She knew that we were there, but it took a really, really experienced guide to find her. And a baby cub, I think probably about 5-6 months old, was just loping past our truck, fairly close. Stopped a couple of times to sort of peer at us. Didn't hang around very long. Disappeared pretty quickly. And then here was on our last day in Kenya, we came upon a clan. This isn't the whole clan. I think there are about 13 hyena in this particular clan. And what was significant about this was that probably about, I'm really, really bad at distances, but I guess about 3 times the length of this room on the other side was a lioness, and she was just sitting there just watching this hyena, and they were pretty ticked off because it's one of their favorite areas. This den area is where this clan tends to hang out quite a bit, and they were getting really frustrated at the fact that even though she wasn't doing anything, she wasn't prowling, she wasn't stalking, she wasn't on the move, just the sheer presence that she was there. They have a very adversarial relationship, hyenas and lions, typically because hyenas want to steal whatever the lions kill, and lions are obviously pretty good at doing that. Anyway, so that's number one of the uglies. I took a picture of it only because when I first saw it, I said, oh, how interesting, eggs. It's like, not eggs, hyena droppings. Because hyenas, they have these incredibly strong jaws. They will devour and eat bones. So to get the marrow out and so on, they will eat a lot of bones whilst they're scavenging. And this is the calcium in their droppings. The droppings actually come out white. because of all the calcium that they eat in the bones. Needless to say, consuming all of that calcium just makes their teeth stronger and makes their bones stronger, and so they're that much more effective as killers. The next is the marabou stork. Not a pretty bird. Definitely not a pretty bird. I had my first sighting of one, I think it was 2005 in South Africa. This one was actually taken in Kenya. We were driving into a place called Londolozi. It's a private game reserve in the northeast of the country. And right on the outskirts, you're driving along a dirt road before you get into the reserve. And there was this telephone pole that runs along the outskirts of the reserve. And we just happened to come across this marabou stork just standing. No color touch-up, no sharpening, no, and I loved this picture because I lucked out and it just happened to get a really good shot of marabou. They are not pretty. I mean, that is just not a pretty face. Only a mother could love that. And they really are just not pretty. And then in Kenya, I had an opportunity to see another one. You can't really tell from this picture. It was pouring with rain. It was a horrible, horrible day. I mean, all of the other days that we were there was fantastic, but this day was just cold and miserable and raining. And this stork just looks, yeah.
Now, they can fly, but do they fly well, or do they just fly a little bit?
Yeah, they've like an incredible wingspan. So yeah, so they do fly pretty well. They're not going to be anything like an eagle. So they're not going to be that good, but yeah, they fly fine. Almost on cue, because the bird was just sitting there. And so I said to my sister, do you think it could actually do something? Can you like flap a wing or something? And on cue, thank you very much. Obviously the rain had stopped, and so to try and dry out her wings, they tend to open up. And we had a couple of birds do this, and I was like grateful for it. Thank you, makes for a much better picture. So there it's in sort of full stretch, just showing us her lovely wingspan. And that's a picture from the back. It's just that scrawny neck with the hair and ugly face and bald head with a few little stragglers that aren't sort of nicely kept. I mean, you can be bald and it looks very attractive if you kind of keep the hairs that left there nicely trimmed. This, not trimmed. And here are a couple of baby chicks. This was actually taken in Swaziland. My daughter is studying to be a vet. She got accepted at Tufts to go to veterinary school, so she starts graduate school. Was out at her graduation a couple of weeks ago, and so she heads off to Boston for graduate school in August. So very excited about that. Her interest in animals and in South Africa is pretty extensive, and so she had gone on a student project out to Southern Africa, so Mozambique, Swaziland, and South Africa. And one of the principal responsibilities for the trip that she was there was focused specifically on marabou storks, and tracking, tagging, monitoring, and to see what's happening with the chicks in particular. And so this was one of the pictures that she captured. I can't take credit for this one, but it's one of the pictures that she captured. And there she is, doing whatever it is she's doing to a chick who doesn't look very happy about it. Anyway, so that's the marabou stork. Moving on to, you got it right, the wildebeest. And the wildebeest, it's, I think in America, commonly also called a gnu, G-N-U. I can see why they make ugly. They sort of look a little bit like different parts of different animals have kind of been glued together and they landed up with this. What the wildebeest are perhaps most famous for is the big migration. 1.2 million wildebeest stampede from Serengeti Plains through in Tanzania across the Mara River into Masai Mara. And it is a sight to behold. I've never seen it. I hope to do so one day. This photo was actually a mini migration. Very, very few animals, probably only a couple of hundred. But they just happened to start stampeding through a dry riverbed, and we were fortunate enough to be there as they did it, and so I snapped a few pictures just to catch them. A mom with her calf feeding, and so they really do tug. I mean, they sit there and tug really hard to get the milk flowing. Oh, see? Okay, I don't know how to fix that mic. I have no idea which button I pushed. in preview. All right, so let's go back. Oh, no, I'm going forward. Okay, sorry. No, I can't go back.
You want to go back?
Yes.
More?
Actually, yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah,
Oh,
that's
we're
fine.
going
Yeah,
forward.
back again. All right, so the only reason I said what do you want to do is if you've ever seen the Jungle Book movie, when the vultures are sitting on a tree and Mowgli comes along and, and then Shark, whatever the tiger's name is, comes along and they attach a burning bush to his tail and anyway. So when the British accented vultures are sitting on the branch, they're just sitting there saying, so what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? Anyway, so that's why it's because they're vultures. This one, officially, the ugly vulture that makes the ugly five is the lappet-faced vulture. I am not certain whether this is the lappet-faced vulture or whether this is a turkey vulture. I think it must be lappet-faced because the turkey vulture tends to be more predominant in the New World vultures, which are the Americas, vultures found in Americas. I have to confess and say I think the vultures in the Americas aren't quite as impressive as the vultures in the Old World vultures. I'm not biased or anything. So
Except
the
for the
fact that this
condor.
was taken, huh?
Remember the condor?
The condor is
the
impressive.
largest
No,
lion.
yeah, the
Or
condor is impressive. This would probably be lappet-faced only because it was taken in Kenya. So Kenya, last time I checked, is in Africa, not in the Americas. And so this would make it one of the official five. But some of the vultures generally are not that great. Also, sort of a rainy day. This is post-rain, and again, just airing itself, and on cue, opened up its wings to show us. These ones, the rest of the vultures that you'll see here are all white-backed vultures. They tend to look a little different. You'll see a few examples of them that I don't think make them look the same, but they are all white-backed vultures. This was a shot taken at night, one of the night drives, and they use infrared spotlights so that you can actually capture, capture some of the wildlife because it is pretty dark in Africa when you're out in the wild. Not too many lights around, even though they are structured.
Do they hang around with the hyenas because they are both?
They do. They hang around. No, not the hyenas, because hyenas would be competition. So they are going to hang around more. And several instances we've seen vultures sitting up in dead tree. Dead tree with vultures sitting on branches of dead tree. Very, very common sight. As you can see there, dead tree, vultures sitting on dead tree. And below, pride of lions. So they're going to go where the predators are, because the predators are the ones that kill. So they want to go and, they don't want to compete with other scavengers. They would rather go for, go to the source rather than compete with, other enemies who are vying for the same food. I show another picture of this one only because I tried my damnedest. I didn't quite get it, but I tried my damnedest. It was a full moon. And so what I was trying to do, and I just couldn't get further onto the ground to actually get the shot and get the full moon completely. But there was a way, if you weren't trying to photograph and you didn't get out of the truck, that you could actually have got the full moon completely behind the vulture, which would have been an awesome shot. Anyway, that was as close as I got. I couldn't quite get it any more than that, but it worked out okay. And there's also, it's the same vulture, which to me looks really different. I mean, I don't think this looks the same at all. But it was taken in East Africa, so I know it can't be the Cape vulture, even though it looks a little bit like the Cape vulture, because the Cape vulture tends to be indigenous to South Africa only. All right, so that's the vulture. You're right, warts and all. I don't have much to say about warthogs. I really don't. They're just ugly. They're just pigs and ugly. They are vicious. They hang around with hyenas a lot. And I think the hyenas don't pick a bite. Those tusks are really... I don't really see that one. It doesn't really have tusks, so I'll have to move on then. I'm sure I must have one. There you go, you can see the tusk. Those tusks can do some really, do some real damage. We saw a lot of warthog in Kenya. I didn't take one picture of any warthogs in Kenya. I don't know why, they're warthogs. I'm going to move through warthogs fairly quickly. Very interesting, I saw this, it was taken on one of my trips in South Africa. And when they're rooting for vegetables and hunting around for little roots and seeds and other things that they eat, they get down on their knees. You see the knees? They actually bend down, they get down on their knees, and they scavenge like this, and they just sit there on their knees with the tail pointed up in the air. It looks very bizarre, really, really strange. Anyway, so I just got a picture, and they like to wallow, which is where you can see the wet.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. This one just happened to get in kind of doing a little, I don't know, a weird jumping thing. Mom with 3 little piglets going down to the river, and there is Mom and Dad and 3 little piglets. Off they go into the river. Happy little family. These two were having a bit of it was a weird setup. Why they didn't like have head to head or butt to butt or something, as opposed to kind of doing this thing. But they did get into a little bit of a scuff, so I'm going to just pick up a couple of pictures there. All right, so that's the end of the ugly 5. What do you think?
Excellent. Amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. So this is the rest of the presentation. I have a few other animals. Yeah. Anyway, we'll see how far we get. Cheetah, I mean, it would be incomplete because they don't make the big 5. Honestly, to me, get rid of the damn buffalo, stick the cheetah in there, and I'll be happy. But I guess 3 cats and 2, horned or tusked animals, it doesn't keep the right balance. This was also in Londolozi Game Reserve in South Africa. One of my first sightings of cheetah. It was awesome. We were quite far away. I didn't have a super long telephoto lens, so this was as close as it got. But it still wasn't too bad. A mom and her cub. Cheetahs are really interesting. They have a paw and claws that are somewhere between a dog and a cat. So semi-retractable. And the reason they're semi-retractable is they need to keep them extended for high speed hunts. Cheetah's fastest land mammal on Earth and can get up to speeds of 80, 90 kilometers an hour. So they can really, really move. Some of the other cheetah that we saw, this was a mom and cub. After they finished their little drink, they went off and gallivanted. It's unusual because of the retractable, semi-retractable claws. They don't, even though they want the elevation to be able to see, see prey, potential prey. You don't find them up trees very long because if their claws get stuck in the bark, it's difficult to retract to actually then get back down. So we were fortunate enough to see this, and you can see that if you look really, really close, you can see here, the claws look a little bit like a dog paw. It doesn't look entirely like a cat, cat paw. So we got to see an adult of a tree, and then we got to see a cub of a tree too. That was kind of fun. This was an achievement beyond belief because cheetah are the smallest of the wild cats. The well-known ones, and they tend to be prey. The cubs tend to be prey. So for a mom to have raised 3 cubs to this age is pretty impressive. For her to have done so, we spent about 2.5 hours literally just watching this mom teach the cubs to hunt. And she would send them out, and they'd go running off, and you can see some pictures, just running along branches and chasing each other, and sort of play hunting to kind of trip their prey and bring them down. My daughter at a cheetah sanctuary in Africa, so she got to hang out with cheetahs up close. And zebra, I include just because these are one of my first experiences with zebra, well, first thing that I experienced with zebra that was different than any of the zebra I'd seen in the past. These are burchels. They're a common zebra, the one that you're most familiar with, that you'll see in zoos. And here I had a nice little picture of his mom and baby. And here is the ears. Do you notice the difference between this one and the previous one? This one's called grevy's. It's only found in the north of Kenya, And it is quite different, in my opinion. It's got the rounded, tufted ears as opposed to the pointy ears.
So that's
And
not
if you
a
look at the
mix.
markings, huh?
That's not a mix of some sort.
No,
like-
that's Grovies. That's an official, so that is the species. And their markings are very different. So their tummies are entirely white, and their markings are very different. And I captured something, oh yeah, mating, everything. I capture everything. Everything mates. Whenever I drive around, they mate. And so I take pictures. Lots of animals mating. This is the money picture. You know why?
Because you have both.
You have both of
You
them.
have both of them.
You don't find virtual zebra up in the north of Kenya. And why? I don't know whether he got adopted or he just lost his way. It's a long way to go from Masai Mara all the way up to the north of Kenya.
Is there
But
interbreeding, do you think? No.
He was
They
a
don't do
this
that.
out.
So it was remarkable, but you can see how different the markings
Oh, yeah.
are between the
Yeah.
two. Just looking at the tail's different. Look at that white skinny tail as opposed to the big thick black tail. The markings in terms of the big black that aren't as uniform, whereas the thin lines there are literally just almost drawn on. With the ribbons.
Yeah, the lines go all the way down the stomach, the belly, too, yeah.
They do indeed. They do indeed. And now I have a paddle that says nothing. So we're going to stop on Jackal. All right. Great.
Thank you.
One quick question.
Yes.
When you're taking these pictures, are you with a group? A big bus, a little bus, just two people and a guide?
No, the vehicle, most vehicles can seat 7 guests. And then there's in South Africa, in Botswana, and in Zambia, which is where I've done most of my travels. You usually have a tracker who does the tracking and checking the spoor to find you the animals, and you have a guide, your ranger, who's essentially the one who tells you the stories and the information about the animals and that kind of thing. So that would be 9 people on a truck. We were fortunate in Kenya because of things being so dire there that it was literally just my sister, myself, and one guide.
Wow.
And so we got to, and they said, we'll do whatever. I know, isn't that cute? Look at the puppy. They get to do whatever the customer wants. And so they said, well, what would you like to do today? And presented us with options. And we actually went out for 13 hours.
Wow.
We went out at 5:30 in the morning, and we didn't come back until 7 o'clock in the evening.
What do you do for bathrooms? Sorry.
Oh, Gerenuk. Gerenuk, just while you've got it there. The Gerenuk is also only found in the north of Kenya. They are the only type of antelope that will stand on its hind legs to get to the foliage higher up, so that they don't have to compete with all the other antelope because they're essentially that much higher. But they stand on their hind legs like that, and they kind of like, put their front legs like this, and they pull the branches down. So very bizarre. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Tracy.
Sure.
Most interesting.
Good.
Would we all stand for the 4-way test?